What's going on, Nation? Opening up the conversation here on YouTube. Taking a step back, might zoom out on the camera a little bit. I want to bring these chats into more casual conversation. I know it's the middle of the night and we're trying to figure out where people are and where they're going and what's going on. A suddenly not so casual Tuesday morning. I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff. My webcam is above me, so that's part of the reason why I'm always looking here as opposed to up here, because when I'm looking at sports data and whatever, I think that's an interesting point that people oftentimes say, Shark, what are you looking at? And actually, I hate to use the word regret because I don't really have any regret in my life, but if we all met in real life, I'm looking at you guys straight in the eye. I'm like, what's up? What's up, bro? What's going on? I love you guys. But when we record these videos, the webcam is always above us, and it's kind of a bit of a abstraction, which I don't love because it's not representative of how I am in real life. But taking a breath, just cracked a beer, gonna have a beverage with you guys, winding down the night here. Monday Night Football, obviously a catastrophic disaster for the Giants, but cheers to you guys. Gonna share this on Twitter right now. And JMC, what's up, brother? What's going on, brother? Let's see if we get some more people in here. Just started this channel about a month ago, so really trying to build. And of course, having a following on Twitter, now known as X, the insanity of that to a certain degree. Trying to get people to even come over here is so interesting because it seems to be a difficult process. And, it's one of those things where I know, certain people like different apps. And I certainly love Twitter, of course, X now, but I love Twitter. I think the conversation is incredible. I think YouTube doesn't have the same conversational value, and it just is not the same platform from that standpoint. But, YouTube is an incredible audio and video platform. And the Gun and I are highly committed to doing content on this channel. And I do want to make an announcement on the channel in a minute. Just let some people file in the door here. I hope you guys are having a great Tuesday morning. Going to share this up just again here, see if we get some people in here. No offense to those of you who are in here, because I love you guys so much, but I want to get more people in here. The abundance is very real. All right, let's see if we can pull some stragglers in there and see what's going on. What's up, Moach, my guy? What up, brother? Just having a glass of water along with this glorious beverage. A little highlight here for those of you guys who are wondering what I drink. Highlight is pretty much my go-to beverage. Really just a great IPA. And just a Florida beverage. When I was up in the Northeast, I never really used to. I didn't even know what Highlight was, if I'm being honest with you guys. And just a great beverage. 7.5% IPA. Not too strong. You can have a few of these. I've had a few. Nothing crazy, but you can have a few of these. You feel a nice little buzz. Nothing too heavy. It doesn't really make you feel terrible in the morning, which I think is obviously very important for those of us who drink. You want to get up ready to go, as opposed to just really feeling it. Gator in the house. What up, brother? Been a while. Hope everything's well in the areas. With the people, the association people, we know, and I don't want to, talk about that, but you know what I'm talking about. I hope it's going down like that. I hope everything's not super chaotic and it's all good. Taking a breath, guys. I was watching the game and I can't say I was wound up. I wasn't wound up, but I was pretty mind blown by the game. I got to be honest with you guys. Obviously, I suggested I thought the Giants would come back. I was clearly really off on that, and I thought the Giants would compete. You guys know me very well, and for those of you guys who don't know me, welcome. I am the Shark. This is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. What that means is basically highest level of pragmatic analysis in sports betting that I believe you can find anywhere, and I love to do it. And it does stand for ride the wave out of the water. It is the slogan. It is the brand. It is the lifestyle. It is what we do. We train our minds and our bodies to be the most successful sports bettors we could possibly be. And it's the entire lifestyle integration of that process. You cannot be a good sports bettor if you have bad process in your life. You cannot be unhealthy mentally or physically if you want to succeed in sports betting. And, speaking of being unhealthy mentally and physically, I think we can go directly to the Giants. And I think obviously the physical problems are incredibly exposed in tonight's game. principal offensive lineman not in there. I believe the final statistic was 11 sacks on our guy Daniel Jones, who just was at the highest level of struggle. If we're going to be very, very blunt and honest about it, you hate to see the guy struggle like that. I can't say he's the most interactive human being on the planet. He doesn't necessarily bring you in as if you want to go hang out with the guy, but regardless, the offensive line doing him absolutely zero favors tonight. And the rest of the team just really kind of dead. I mean, offensively, particularly, no Saquon Barkley. The wide receiving core, I was saying in the group chat before, but it doesn't really appear they have any size. And I think that's kind of mind-blowing from a personnel perspective, in the front office. When you construct this roster, what are you doing? I mean, you bring in Darren Waller, which is a totally separate conversation. He does have the body, but he's not a wide receiver. And what are you doing? You're going 2, 3, 4 deep. Not one guy has a physical, imposing presence down the field or with the secondary. And I want to talk about Darren Waller for a second, but, I was saying this in the group chat. I think this is pretty interesting. Darren Waller had very, very noteworthy mental health problems with the Raiders. I believe he was suicidal at one point. And truthfully, people don't get to suicide just because they had a bad day. They get there over the course of years of mental turmoil, which is really hard to pull out of a person once they get that far. And the fact that he has gotten as far as he has, in my opinion, is incredibly impressive. Nets Bets in the chat. What up, brother? My guy. Nice bet tonight, by the way. You know when to fade the guys. But staying course with that, when you find yourself finding some comfortability with the Raiders, and I think it was also John Gruden before, of course, he got removed from the whole situation for whatever, off the field remarks, and that's a totally different conversation. But, this guy found comfortability, and he struggled in his life, and he's finally comfortable. And then they move him to the biggest market in professional sports in America. And I'm not throwing shade at Chicago, Philly, Boston, LA, Miami, but New York City is the biggest media market in the country. So you bring a guy that has horrendous mental health history to the biggest stress box, hot box, just pressure point in the country. Could you find a worse spot for a guy that has mental health issues? I don't think so. And I think this really goes back to just an ongoing, endless conversation in this country and in this world. If people see a broken leg on the street, they think that person is half dead, rush him to the hospital, give him all the help he needs. There are people walking around in this country every single day that have more mental turmoil than you would ever comprehend that look totally normal. And the biggest thing with mental health is that you cannot tell what's going on looking at a person from the exterior. And that is why people have no sympathy for it. They don't see what's going on. It's been largely undocumented for centuries in contemporary life. People just don't know who has problems until it explodes. And that's the crazy thing about mental health. Usually it's not the small burns over the course of days and weeks. It's only when it comes to the breaking point that people realize it, and the person is so far gone because they've been internalizing these horrible moments for months and years. So a guy like Waller, who has gone down that path, as we explicitly explore it, you move him to the biggest pressure cooker in the whole country? Just the wrong move for a guy. I don't know who's advising him. I don't know what's going on with the Vegas advisory booth or group and the Giants. personnel, their GM, the whole thing. It's just the wrong move for the guy. And you see, he's been totally ineffective. He's clearly not meshing very well with Daniel Jones. That's a secondary point to the Giants from a psychological perspective. Daniel Jones is just so unbelievably disconnected conversationally. And you just look at a guy who is going to lead a group on the offensive side of the ball, and within this roster across 53, because they just signed him to a gigantic player 1A style contract. This guy is not a leader of men. Leading men is largely biological. You cannot teach that to the average guy. You can't teach him how to do it. You can't teach him how to adjust the moments of the indefinite amount of people he's going to meet along the way. You can't teach him it by giving him money, thinking it's going to empower him. You cannot teach it. The deepest psychological conversation is this ongoing idea of nature versus nurture. Everything's an interweb of both, but leading men at a high level is largely nature and biological. You can't teach it. You cannot teach it. And Daniel Jones does not have it. And the fact that he is the quarterback of the offense, he is I believe, the highest paid player on the team by a significant margin. And he is a very shy personality. He is not fluid with conversation. He is not an energy body. It is the wrong dude to have leading your team. There's no way around it. And you go back through the Giants, and you go back to the previous generation with Eli Manning. Eli Manning was not a leader either. And I think if you really go through Eli Manning's career, he did not have that great of a career. He got 2 Super Bowls, but I really firmly believe this. He got 2 Super Bowls because of an absolutely elite defensive line. One of the best defensive lines in NFL history. And my guy Nets Bets, I know he is so loyal to the camp, but I get it. Believe me, I've been in New York for a long period of time prior to coming to Florida. But the defensive line won him the first Super Bowl against the Patriots in 2007, unquestionably. The Giants scored 17 total points in the game. They got a late touchdown. They were sitting at 10 late fourth quarter. That was a defensive Super Bowl victory. There's no way around it. And you go to the 2011 Super Bowl, I would say slightly more impressive offensively, but nonetheless, the same defensive core and the same general group just propping up, which, again, in my opinion, I hate to use the word mediocre because I think there's far more mediocre quarterbacks in the history of football. I think that if I was going to give Eli Manning a corollary, I would say he's a Joe Flacco. And I think Joe Flacco is pretty much right in his range of talent, personality, and output over the course of his career. Obviously, 1 Super Bowl versus 2, but very similar, very similar. And I think that, when you look at both of those guys, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that Joe Flacco and Eli Manning are very similar guys within their career across all points, psychologically, physically, tactically, and professionally. And Chris Verdi, what's up, brother? Appreciate you making comments, my guy. I'm going to share this up, bring some more people in here, hopefully. And I'm going to be doing all these late night chats. I've done these on Twitter for years. I'm going to be doing them on here because it's actually more conducive to what I'm doing. I don't have to hold the phone up and go and Periscope and whatever. I can actually just sit here, in the studio that I work in and just hang out with you guys and talk to you guys, which is what I love to do. So, LVCC, what up, brother? What's going on, my guy? I didn't see you comment before. Did not shut you out. Definitely not. If I shut you out by whatever, just tell me what happened. If something happened, let me know. I'll fix it very quickly. But yeah, I think let's just finish up on the game tonight. I want to just make a couple comments on the game tonight. Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways of the game tonight is not so much the Giants look terrible. I think it's the fact that the Seahawks might not be nearly as good as people think. And I think if you look at this game, I mean, the Seahawks were effectively gift wrapped 14 points. I mean, you got to give a hell of a lot of credit to the new the rookie DB out of Illinois. And I was making a couple of comments off the record of people watching the game, but it made me smile because you guys remember we loved, I should say, Brett Bielema and the boys last year, the Fighting Illini with that defense. So to see their top guy, Witherspoon, come to the league, top 5 pick, and ball out like this, it made me smile. I got to be honest with you guys. I love seeing good people do good things, and that made me smile. And Debbie Cav in the house, what up, brother? Roll one up, son. What up, bro? I hope Jay's well, man. I totally different conversation, which I don't want to go into right now, but I hope he's well. I really do. I have nothing but good vibes for Jay. It was a bizarre situation that just went awry, and life is weird like that. So who knows? But on this particular game, when you look at the box score, I have it up right now. Giants go 4 and out at the 27-yard line, the opening drive. You guys are watching the game, so you see the energy the Giants had in the opening drive, and the first thing that came to mind for me when I saw the opening drive for the Giants. And this is how I think. I always think across the league in abstract environments psychologically. This reminded me of the first drive the Bears had at home in week 1. They came out with crazy energy with Justin Fields against the Packers, and they went 4 and out in their own territory on a really botched 4th and 1 play. And these teams just have such poor execution of these sneaks now. These quarterbacks have no balls, and they're scared. They just dive in and lay down. They can't get 1 yard. And John Martin, what up, brother? Appreciate it, man. And if you guys go back, and I know you won't, but that's fine. I'm just giving you the remark. But if you go back to week 1 and you see the Chicago Bears' first drive of the game, it was the same exact thing. It was a mediocre football team, a team that has problems psychologically, and a team that strategically is incorrect in their short yardage on-field mechanism. And they came out with huge energy. 4th and 1 didn't get it. The other team turned it right around on them and scored a touchdown. The Giants tonight came out with huge energy on the first drive. They were moving the ball. Jones was very quick with his execution. The receivers were hyped as hell. I mean, they were juicing up emotionally more so than they usually do on a regular catch. And then they go down to the 27-yard line. They go 4 and out. They can't get 1 yard. And I didn't say this to anybody because I wasn't live on the internet, but I was sitting there watching it. And I thought to myself, the first thing I thought was, fuck, man. This is exactly what the Bears did in their first drive in week 1. Huge emotion, 4 and out, nothing. This game's about to flip real fast. And it did. And, the crazy thing is, Seattle didn't score on the next drive either. And Seattle left a ton on the table in this game. A missed field goal, a 4 and out deep themselves. But the Giants just kept giving them everything. And, the noteworthy point is the Giants are missing so many integral offensive linemen, and the pressure was just relentless throughout the entire game. But, when you look at some of the mistakes that really just gift-wrapped, obviously a turnover super deep in their own territory, which led to their first touchdown of the game. And then later the pick 6 on the 3-yard line, by our guy Devin Witherspoon from Illinois I just mentioned. But, it's a 24-3 game, and that's 14 points given, not literally, but more or less given away to Seattle. This was actually a lot tighter of a game than people might think. And that's where I bring back to the point. I don't think Seattle is that good. And I think that when you really look at what Seattle did tonight, it was highly unimpressive offensively. Of course, my guy Chris, diehard Hawks fan, so you'll see what I'm saying on this. This is, I think, also super interesting. The other touchdown they got was actually Drew Lock coming in and having a ridiculous 50-yard pass to the starting or backup tight end. And I was watching it, and I was unbelievably surprised. I was shocked that dude did not step out of bounds running down the sideline. And I remarked in our group chat, Petros in the house, what's going on, brother? And I said, that was like some serious athleticism and balance from that guy. I mean, that guy must have weighed 260 pounds, and he's towing the sideline like some professional gymnast. I mean, that was incredibly impressive from an athletic balance standpoint. Just so beautiful athletically, to be perfectly honest. But I do think when you look at that from the perspective again of the Seahawks, I think the Giants defense did let down that drive. Geno Smith got hurt. They had been competing their butt off for, most of the half defensively. And then all of a sudden the backup quarterback comes in and they just give up a quick drive, just like that. 7 plays, 75 yards in 126 to close the half in a 7-3 game, right after they got a 55-yard field goal, which, obviously was somewhat of a momentum shift at that point, given how poorly the Giants had played at that point in the game. And it really just speaks to the fact that everything that Seattle did offensively to get touchdowns is not sustainable. The Giants had a deep turnover in their own end, which turned into a quick touchdown, a 97-yard pick six, and the backup quarterback coming in, going 7 for 75 in a long, weird play, catching the Giants defense napping because he was a backup. So if you really analyze all 3 touchdowns, I would venture to say all of them were outlierish to a degree, or maybe complete outliers. I mean, by definition, when you throw a pick at the 3-yard line, an outlier just means on a statistical graph what is the least likely outcome. A pick six from the 3-yard line, 97 yards, is the 3rd most unlikely outcome. 98 yards being number 2, 99 yards being number 1, or I guess in the end zone, so 4th. But whatever. Point is, extremely outlierish stuff. So I think the takeaway is that Seattle's not that good. But here's where it gets really interesting. Seattle has a bye week in between tonight's game and week 6 at Cincinnati. And I was looking at the game and I was thinking to myself, I want to buy Cincinnati next week 100%. But I looked at the schedule and I thought, they get a bye week, which I don't obviously make the schedule or study it in extreme detail, but I will say this. I don't know how many times in NFL history there's been an out-of-division back-to-back in the opposite time zone with a bye week in between. I mean, you guys can look it up. That just seems weird to me. So is Seattle going to go home and then come back out to Cincinnati, I guess? It just seems weird from a scheduling standpoint. John, what's up, brother? No doubt. Let me see who's in the chat here. Nets Bets probably went to bed. I think he's been up for a while. Rolling up son. I blindly bet the Seahawks and didn't watch because Danny's now 0-7. Yeah. And, also, crazily enough, for whatever reason, it seems like Pete Carroll has something with his guys on primetime games. I mean, ESPN's obviously flashing those stats so aggressively, but they're just great. And I think when you start to see something so sustainable, I think going back all the way to 2005, that's got to be the coach. He's got to have a way. He's just in his player's head. Doesn't matter if it's what generation of players it is. He just coaches well in those spots. So I think that is noteworthy for sure. For sure. No doubt, John. Cheers, man. Hope you're having a great one. LBCC, what up, bro? Hilton Diggs on deck. Yeah. Yep. Definitely not a leader of men. There's no way around it. And that's a problem. You have to have a voice in the huddle and the locker room. You cannot lead a championship group if there's not a voice. Let's go back through some of the recent champions. I mean, Mahomes obviously has won 2. Who else won? Stafford. Stafford's a voice. I mean, he's not maybe the biggest voice, but he's a voice. Not only that, he's a veteran. I think with Stafford, one of the biggest, things that is not talked about enough is, I think his wife had cancer or something, and he had to really fight like a deep emotional struggle with her and the whole thing. So this guy's war tested on and off the field. And I'm pretty sure that's why he's a McVay guy, because McVay is that type of guy. He's very militaristic. He's a grinder type of mentality type of dude. And I know. And Stafford made those comments in training camp. And, he said basically like I got nothing in common with these guys on social media, whatever. It kind of blows my mind that he said that, and then all of a sudden Puka Nakua is setting records for rookie receiving just like that. So sometimes it goes to show that psychology can be fixed very quickly, apparently. But I do understand that 100%. I mean, Stafford's sitting there at what 34, 35 years old. He's got to hang with guys that weren't even born when he was in high school. So the gap is significant for sure. For sure. For sure. Let me just retweet this, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the show this week. We really put a lot of work into the show this week. And, I said this last week, but, working with the gun has become a real amazing thing for me. And I love working with the gun. I think the shows have gotten on point where I like them. And, somebody mentioned J Money before. I think one of the best things about myself and J Money is the shows just were really on point. They were very fluid. It was just supernatural. And I don't mean supernatural like that. I mean, it was just very fluid and natural. And I think Guns and I have achieved that. Like, I think Guns and I have a very just great feel to what we're doing now. And I really enjoy it. And I always want to give Guns a shout on the show. Like, you guys know how I am. I'm all about meritocracy. And that's why I will call out bullshit too. Like, because I'm not shading anybody. And people thought I was shading them in the summer, and I was calling out people this is that. I was saying they're not a good handicapper. They're looking at the wrong things. People were taking all sorts of insults. I'm very much oriented into if you do the right thing, you will see good results. It's not easy. If you do, I will reward the hell out of you, and I'll give you all the credential in the world. And if you don't, I'm not going to say you're a bad person, but I'll say your process is incorrect and you might not see good results. And, a lot of people unfortunately can't understand that it's not personal. We're talking about the process of life and the decisions one is making in their daily life to get long-term results. And it still blows my mind, some of the relationships that I don't have anymore with people because people thought that I was personally attacking them. And you notice I never said anything personal about them. I never said they're a bad person. I never said they have bad intentions, they're immoral, any of this stuff. I just said they're doing this with their plays. They're not following truthfully what really is long-term winning strategy, and they're going to see the other side. And apparently in this industry, which is a very insecure industry, there's no way around it, people don't take that lightly. And I have no shame saying those things because, again, it was never wrong. And everything that I ever said, even in some of those moments where people got angry, it wasn't wrong. And I think that's a real key point that I want to make with you guys. I'm never shading anybody in the world. I love people. I love soul and spirit and the human desire. I will call things out for what they are in terms of the actual quality of a person within an endeavor. That's all it is. It's kind of like Simon Cowell years ago on American Idol. He loves people. He loves industry. He told people, you're a terrible singer. That's it. You're not a bad person. You're just not a good singer. And that's basically what I've done over the course of years. Sometimes I've said, this guy's not a good handicapper. And guys flip out and take it so far out of context and the whole thing. But it's never personal. It's just me making a very, very specific remark to handicapping style and what will win long term. And I usually make those remarks. And I think that part of the reason why it becomes so explosive is because usually when I make those remarks, it's when the guys are super hot. And I feel more compelled to make those comments when they're super hot. Because when I see fishy cappers who are going to lose long term because they're just taking the wrong numerical angles on the game, they all win sometimes. And when they're hot, this is when I make the calls because people start following and tailing. And I know people are going to cliff dive when they inevitably cliff dive. So truthfully, it's me, just my moral center, wanting people who don't totally understand the statistical orientation of sports betting, that you're following the wrong guy. He's just hot right now. And you're being fooled into thinking he's going to make you a lot of money and you're going to cliff dive later. And that's just the honest truth with some of the comments that I've made. It's so misconstrued. It's so taken outside of context. And it kind of blows my mind, honestly, that some guys just have such a lack of personal awareness that they might not be doing the right thing statistically, and that somebody could call them out because they're going to lead people astray in the long run. And it's kind of a wild thing. So I just want to make that comment. I was talking to somebody about it before, and these chats are a little free flowing. So just want to give that chat point because I do want to make that point. I just it just blows my mind. So whatever. LBCC RRPP Giants history. Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about next week. I have 4 plays. I already dropped 4 plays. I'm not sure if you guys found those plays. I did post those plays earlier today and last night because I felt like we were going to get the best line in that environment. I don't entirely think the line is going to matter in these games. You guys know very well I don't cap CLV. Shout out to Kelly in Vegas for the hilarity of her CLV trophy comments, which I find to be absolutely hilarious. But I do not cap the line to beat the line or find CLV. I love CLV. I mean, if we beat the line by 3 points like we did with the Ravens last week, beautiful. But I'm not worried about it. Or actually, we beat it by 5 points, but I'm not worried about it. I still think we're going to win on the original line anyway. That's what I'm capping. But, you get a little more space. Why not? Nick Masucci, what up, brother? Cheers, my guy. Just having a couple beers here, winding down. The NFL week is a 5-day work week. It's not the contemporary work week, but it is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So Monday night is really the Friday night of the work week for handicapping and doing content within football. So that's why I come on here on Monday night because I'm winding down. It's kind of like a Friday night for me. I don't really get back in here from a content standpoint until Thursday. So hanging out. Yamal, what's up, brother? Appreciate you, man. Big dogs in the chat. Scroll back on that. I'm not going to go back into it. But just a lot to discuss. The final point I will make on that, I want to talk about Brian Daboll for a second. I was watching Brian Daboll in the press conference, and I do believe he threw his quarterback under the bus. That is never a good look. That is the sign of a fractured locker room, and it should never come from the coach. When the coach is going that direction, I think it speaks to one thing, and I hate to say it, but it speaks to an emotional immaturity. And, when I was watching Daboll on the sideline, he threw an iPad, which is fine. A lot of coaches have thrown iPads. That's not exclusive to Brian Daboll. But just the way he was looking up at the sky. He looked kind of confused, distraught, emotional. Not the things you want to see. I mean, you see the top coaches take losses. Mike Tomlin being a great example. Mike Tomlin owns his shit, and he doesn't shade his players. And Daboll did pretty much the polar opposite tonight. And, you have to ask yourself a question. I mean, this guy's been a great offensive coordinator for a while. He came over last year, caught a bit of a heater, I will say. If you guys remember this last year, the Giants made the playoffs, but the Giants made the playoffs mostly beating up on bad teams in the regular season. They had a cluster of games against non-playoff teams, Carolina, Houston, I believe Indy, couple others, really kind of cupcake games. I think they're seeing the other side of it right now. And I think that, maybe Brian Daboll is not equipped emotionally to go on the downside of potentially some sort of variance in this league. And I just thought the way he handled the game was just not how you want to see it. And, I'm not going to sit here and criticize the guy like he's some sort of, superhuman, because one of the things that I really do dislike is when the mainstream media just rips these guys. They're human beings. They're under a ton of pressure. I get it. I just think that even within that pressure and the loss and the whole thing, some of his body language was just not what you want to see. And it really struck me as, I hate to use the word, but immature. Like there's certain guys that are overly emotional, volatile, aggressive, angry. Those are not great adjectives, but they're better adjectives for a head coach than immature. And I do think I saw immaturity tonight, which I don't like. So not sure where the Giants are going. Again, the personnel is a problem. I think the lack of size in the receiving core is terrible. I think Brian Waller coming to New York is a problem emotionally. The guy is probably not equipped for the media and the pressure cooker of New York. I think Dable's immature. I think Daniel Jones is overpaid and the wrong quarterback and not a leader of men. Saquon Barkley, obviously injury prone. You hate to say that. The guy's an absolute elite level athlete, but he is injury prone. The way he runs, he incurs a lot of volatility on his lower body. It's always been an issue. You can never trust that he's going to be there for 16, 17 games. I mean, the Giants have a lot of problems. And I think it's a lot of the personnel issues. And obviously, final point before we talk about next week's card, but the offensive line injuries clearly were exposed tonight in the highest possible way. 11 sacks. The guy, Daniel Jones, couldn't even move. Could not move. And, he was in the press conference taking all sorts of responsibility. And, the media is so fraudulent from the standpoint that they said it's the right thing to say. It's like, is it though? Like, I don't know. Like, you're getting your ass kicked because your offensive line is terrible and you come in and say I was terrible. I don't know.
Open our doors every day.
As ESPN plays a commercial, they must have heard that I was calling them out for asking stupid questions and whatnot. What up, Jay? What's going on, brother? Yeah, Emal, 100%, without question. Just nothing. He's getting shredded. He had no time whatsoever. And anyway, let's talk about next week's card. There's a lot going on in this card. I want to do a quick rundown. Actually, I'll answer the question, Emal. I think, truthfully, if we want to be super, super recency bias oriented, which of course I don't like at all, but let's do it for the sake of this moment. In this particular week, I think Zach Wilson looked like the better quarterback, which is insane, but he did. He was much more decisive. His accuracy was far better. He led the group better. He was more accountable. He was better in the press conference after the game. I think Zach Wilson won this week in terms of the New York City quarterback battle on and off the field from a conversational and an actual on-field practitioner standpoint. I know, John, they're going to lay me off. Wild, right? Can't imagine being on that network and having them tell me that I can't say anything that I want to say. Ridiculous. You never know, though. I mean, they let Scott Van Pelt have a little rope. They let Stephen A. do whatever he wants, so who knows. But, yeah. Benjamin Rash, what up, brother? You the man, bro. Appreciate it, man. Zach can make the throws. Danny has never proven he can. Yeah, I mean, Danny's such an interesting quarterback because, if we're being honest, there's not a lot of white quarterbacks that have been, at his size and status over the course of the league that are so elite in the run game. I mean, you guys remember some of the plays he's made over the course of his career. I mean, like, remember that one run? I think it was like a 70-yard run where he stumbled down. And I think it was in Philly. But regardless, I mean, the guy's a hell of an athlete. You could see him in the press conference after the game. He's a big dude. Like, he's fucking fit for sure. But I don't know. I just think the emotional makeup's not there. The team is definitely held prisoner to that, for sure. And I think Zach Wilson has come along without question. I think he showed a lot yesterday, and he really got down on himself. But I think that it's a good thing because if you guys remember last year, I think early season, he had a press conference almost polar opposite to last night's press conference. I forget when it was. It may have been 2 seasons ago. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, but it doesn't matter. He had one press conference where he was taking zero responsibility for how bad he was. Like, he was almost like kind of punking back at the media, like laughing at them. And he went full circle last night. He's matured a lot. I think Aaron Rodgers has a lot to do with that. I think that people have learned a lot about Aaron Rodgers, obviously being on Hard Knocks, not being in Green Bay, being in New York City. I think it's fair to say at this point in time, Aaron Rodgers is a very solid to above average human being. I'd say a very good dude. And I think that just by nature, if he gives himself to help somebody, which he did not do in Green Bay, notably with a lot of the backups they brought in, and I think more specifically Jordan Love, he could be a really good mentor for a guy. And I think he's probably doing that behind the scenes because Zach Wilson has improved immensely. There's no way around it. You can just see his makeup has improved immensely. And last night's press conference told the story because, again, that was the polar opposite of what he did about a year or two ago, where he really just took zero responsibility and was almost laughing it off like it meant nothing, coming out of BYU and just this baby face in New York. getting pressed, whatever the fuck he's doing, big contract, whatever. So I think in this week, Zach Wilson obviously won the heads-up New York City quarterback competition. I think by default, Daniel Jones has a better overall sample. ESPN showed his career stats. His career stats were terrible. So maybe not. Maybe not. I think New York City football right now is in a tough spot. And let me talk about some of these games next week. I want to talk about the Chiefs game. I'm not sure if you guys got the Chiefs. I posted the Chiefs last in that group. I usually do this on early week because I don't post one final card because I'm actually handicapping it live as I post the plays. And I'm getting them in and I see the line and I see the line moving. So I play it and I post it basically simultaneously. But I played the Chiefs at -5.5, and I highly advise you guys to play that now. I think that will get steamed up to probably -6 or higher throughout the week. And I'm going to take a sip of water here. But, one of the things that I talked about in baseball season, and which I think is incredibly important, I talked about how you want to be betting pitchers that have been in the league for a while, and they're very sustainable environmentally. They always do the same thing against the same opponents. In pro football, you don't get a chance to do that very often because the teams turn over at such a high rate. It's very rare you get a team that has 2, 3, 4 years on record with the same core group, coach, quarterback, personnel. The Chiefs are that. And when I started to look at this, I really, really love what I'm seeing from the Chiefs. And I had suggested on the show yesterday, I thought the Jets would cover. And I said that kind of off the record because I didn't really look at the game in detail. It was Sunday night. I knew just based on what I was doing yesterday, I didn't really want to have to sweat on Sunday night. I had some plans to do some stuff and whatever. But I said I thought the Jets would cover, and they did. And they did exactly what we kind of suggested they would do on the show. I started going through the schedule today for the Chiefs over the last 3 seasons since the pandemic. I threw the pandemic because it's obviously such a unique environment from a crowd or lack thereof standpoint. But, if you start to go through the Chiefs since 2021, they are really bad on the road, outside of the division, at the AFC. You saw it in week 2. They did not perform very well against Jacksonville. They were very fortunate to cover that spread, -3.5, 17-9. They didn't do anything. The Jags were just worse. The Jags were right there most of the game. A couple real small plays shifted that spread. And then obviously a non-cover of the Jets last night. So that's 2 games already this year where they were very poor out of the division against the AFC. Go back to last year, same exact story. Just not very good in that spot. I went to their divisional games, and this is where I started to really love the Chiefs this week, and I started to see the consistency. They don't play well in Denver at all. They're 0-2 in their last 2 at Denver. Not even a good Denver team, but they don't cover the spread. They are 0-2 in their last 2 at the Chargers. Really tight games. They're 2-0 ATS, their last 2 at Las Vegas, both margin blowouts. So again, you guys see what I'm saying here. It's the same thing every single time they play opponents. And that brings us to this week's matchup at the NFC. They are excellent at the NFC. They're 5-0 ATS last 5 at the NFC. They average 40.4 points per game at the NFC. And their win margin in those 5 games is 16.8 points. This is where they turn up. And if you guys remember last week, or if you guys remember on the show, when Guns and I were capping it live, and I said I think they're going to keep it close because this is not the NFC where they perform well, that was off the top of my head. I went through it. Last year, 3 blowouts, and impressive blowouts too, guys. At Tampa Bay, they put up 41 points at Tampa Bay. Even more impressive, they put up 44 points at the Niners last year, 44-23. They hammered Arizona. Go back to the previous season, and this is where it got even better because it wasn't just an outlier last year, early season. They hammered Philadelphia 2 years ago on the road, 42-30, and they blew out Washington by 20 points. This is what the Chiefs do. Out of conference opponents, and I would say this, notably weaker defenses, Philadelphia 2 years ago, Washington 2 years ago, Arizona in the opener last year. and ultimately torching a very, very elite San Francisco defense last year. You're getting a Vikings team that barely covered against the Panthers. We had it correctly. We knew what was going to happen. I said it wasn't going to be a blowout. I said it was going to be like the Miami game last year, which it was, which was a tight game. They won 24-16, low scoring, 8-point cover at Miami last year. What they do this week at Carolina, low scoring, 8-point win and cover. The corollaries are very clean and specific. They love the NFC. They smash the NFC. And I think the Vikings are not very good, if I'm being honest with you guys. I don't think they're very good at all. And I think this is going to be a margin win. I think the Chiefs win this game minimum by 10 points, and it could get ugly. Because I think that not only that, but I think you're going to see something you don't see very often. You're going to see a bounce-back game for Patrick Mahomes. And, you talk about psychology, and you talk about certain things you don't really get an opportunity to buy very often. This guy rarely has a bad game. He had a bad game the other night. Multiple turnovers. He should have had 3 picks. One of them got taken off the board for, I believe, a kind of a sketchy holding call on the defense. He was not sharp at all. This guy's a competitor. If you guys watch the Netflix show detailing his life off the field, he's a hyper competitor. He's a son of a pro athlete. Pat Mahomes Sr., pitcher for the Mets and the Twins, the 80s and the 90s, a couple other teams as well. This guy's a hell of a competitor. He's going to be pissed. There's no way around it. They're going to come out ready to fucking go. And I think this is a hammer spot, guys. So get on that right now, -5.5. We're on that. Going to take a sip and talk about a couple of the other games here, guys. I don't know if any of you guys are having drinks on Monday night. Probably not. As I mentioned, the work week for guys like myself who are doing content and handicapping with football. This is Friday night for us. We're off for the next 2 days. So this is just our night to hang out and chill. And my phone just died. 1 second, gentlemen. Forgot I didn't have it plugged in. And if you guys have any games you want to talk about or topics, just drop them in the chat. I will talk about anything. I'm just going to take a sip of beer here. That's 47 minutes. My voice does dry up a little bit after 47 minutes. So I'm going to take a quick little break for a half second here, guys. Okay, so let me see what's going on in the chat here. Yeah, John, the Patriots are a mess without question. My brother and I have been Patriots fans since the 90s. I never mentioned it, but we actually lived in Sherburne, Massachusetts in 1991, 2, 3, and 4. When we were kids, I was 5, he was 3. Or no, he was even younger. No, he was born. I don't even fucking know. I was born in 85, so we moved to Sherburne, Massachusetts in 91. And I was rooting for the Patriots back in the Bledsoe days up there, actually. And I never mention it because I don't want to, I hate to say politicize my channel, but, if we're being really honest, saying you're a Patriots fan, it's not American politics. I'm joking, but it's it kind of brings sparks to your environment because they're just such a controversial team. Obviously, best team in the league for 20 years plus. Coach is abrasive, hyper competitive, scandals left and right. It's a real thing. So I haven't said that. You guys that are watching now, I will say this. I have actually been a Patriots fan since the early 90s when I was living in the Boston metro area. So I've had some immense highs with you guys. I just never talk about it. So I know exactly what you're talking about, bro. And my brother's a huge Patriots fan too. He's 5 years younger than me. So he was coming up in that window, and he was sitting in New York the other day. He sent me a picture. He had a Mac Jones jersey on. We were joking after the game. We were saying, I don't know the shelf life for Mac right now. And here's the thing, Mac isn't really that bad. He's not that bad, but you have to ask yourself a question: is he the guy? And I think that's probably one of the biggest things in pro football that just is a continuous process with most teams. You're always going back and forth between, is this quarterback going to reach championship level, or do we move on from him, even if he's solid, which I think is an incredibly difficult decision with a lot of quarterbacks. And I think Mac Jones is in the lower echelon of those quarterbacks. I think in the upper echelon of those quarterbacks are guys not necessarily right now, but I don't know. I was gonna. This might sound wild, but I was gonna say guys like Tua, guys like um, Herbert, because just in my perception, in my view of these guys, I don't see Tua winning a title. I don't see Herbert winning a title. And then you go forward 2 or 3 years. And again, this is the, what have you done for me in a super small window, lack of patience of pro football. Guys just become expendable so quickly. And it's so hard to win a title. And it's just like, you just see guys like that. And I don't know, like especially with Tua, for example. Like, first of all, I feel like Tua is so unbelievably heightened right now by his personnel and the coach. And that's not to say the coach is going anywhere, because I could see McDaniel coaching that team for 10 to 20 years if things go correctly. But I just think Tua is not a great pocket passer. I don't love his delivery. I think he kind of short arms the ball a little bit, which I don't think is great. I think he is aided immensely by Tyreek Hill and some of these receivers and the scheme. So my point is, he looks great now. The NFL is so impatient in terms of titles and title windows. Fast forward 2 seasons from now, let's say 3. So we're sitting here in the fall of 2026, and the Dolphins have not won a championship. Let's say they haven't gotten past the second round of the playoffs, which is very possible. All of a sudden, Tua is approaching 30, big contract. Again, he's not a great pocket passer. He's been injury prone, unfortunately. All of a sudden, he's expendable. And that's where I'm saying with Mac Jones, they're in the same class from the standpoint that they're expendable after a certain period in their career if they don't win a title. And the title is not necessarily coming, even though they look good now with a good team, because it's that hard to win in this sport. And the impatience is that big. Yeah, and exactly. John says it, but exactly. Like, Tua is so injury prone. And again, I like Tua. I liked him at Bama. I like him now. He's injury prone, and he doesn't have a great ball. I will say that he does not have a great ball. He short arms it. So I just see the career arc not that long unless he wins multiple titles, because of course that can buy you years. Again, we talked about Eli Manning before, but Eli wasn't that great. He was a very poor regular season quarterback. He had a lot of interceptions sustainably, and he caught a couple title runs, and he was a legend. But public perception can be very much swayed by 1 title run, 2 title runs. Forget it, you're good, but it doesn't even mean you were good. Football is a wild sport. You can catch some heat in the playoffs, win 3 straight games, you win a title. There's no other sport like it in American sports where you can just win 3 games and get kind of just a quick heater and become a champion. Doesn't exist in any other sport, so it's crazy. And I made the comment about Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is a totally different environment. I think it's very similar. I think Staley and McDaniel are very similar coaches. Younger guys, cerebral, not big body type of dudes, kind of underspoken. You can tell they're pretty damn smart. Justin Herbert, same thing. Throws a good ball, better ball than Tua, that's for sure. Also injury prone, taking a couple concussions in his career, I believe. He gets hit for sure. O-line's not great. They're in a tough division. They have one of the worst spots to be in the sport for the next 7 to 8 years. You're in the division with the Chiefs. It's like Yankees, Red Sox from the early 2000s. You got the best team in the sport in your division. How are you going to do anything? So then you get to a certain point where if I'm actually going to go forward thinking about this, going forward 15, 20 years, I think Justin Herbert is going to have a career arc like Dan Marino. I think he's a sick athlete. I think he's a stud human being. I think he's a good-looking guy. I think he's got swag. I think he's going to live a hell of a life. I think he's got no titles in him. I think he's in a brutal division. He's a gunslinger, and I think his ruthlessness will come to bite him at certain points in time. I think he's got a good coach, but not a great coach. So I think Herbert, his arc is probably a Marino more than anything. And Mr. Maria or Mr. Mafio, what up, brother? Um, Good question. I'll talk about that one. Falcons, Texans. Great question. Great question. Um, Actually, let's talk about the Bengals first. Let's talk about the Bengals first. I agree with you. Truthfully, like when Burrow got hurt in the preseason, you guys remember the clip that came out? I thought he tore his Achilles or something. Like I thought it was far worse than just a calf strain. But now you see him play. I mean, the guy can do nothing. He is totally immobilized. And he really is just like, I was watching ESPN earlier, and they were showing the stats. Like, what was the stat? He had the lowest yards per pass or yards per completion average in NFL history through 4 games, behind Drew Bledsoe's rookie year in '93 and Joey Harrington. You guys remember the kid out of Oregon in 2000? This is Joe Burrow. The guy went to the Super Bowl. The guy went into Buffalo last year in January in a snowstorm and beat the Bills by more than 10 points. Like, this is not this dude at all. And, Imal, just continuing the point, I think they have to shut him down. I think this injury goes nowhere fast. I think they're digging themselves a bigger hole. And, the one thing that I really hate to say, but these calf injuries, when guys continue to play on them, they oftentimes lead to Achilles tears because the Achilles is so interconnected with the lower leg. And that tightness and that scarring tightens up the lower leg, and it can pop because it's like an elastic band that gets overstretched. And when the pressure is too hot, it breaks. And it's exactly what happened with Kevin Durant in the playoffs a couple years ago. Actually, he hurt his calf first, and he rushed back from injury, and he tore his Achilles. And I hate to even talk about it, but this team is being so unbelievably irresponsible with this player right now. They don't need to play this guy. They shouldn't play this guy. We all saw the way he reacted in training camp. You could tell he was in totally immobilizing, excruciating pain. You see how he's playing now? He's like a statue in the pocket. He cannot move. And they look horrible. And that's really the culminating point of the whole topic. It's not like the team is even benefiting from him being on the field right now. So I don't know why they're playing him. There's not one point that suggests playing him is the right move going forward. Not one. Not one. Not one. And, it's unfortunate, but it always goes back to public perception, unrealistic expectation, and money. He just signed the biggest contract in NFL history. He wants to honor it. They're also thinking illogically. Their expectations are also illogical. They've gone to the Super Bowl and the AFC Championship game. They're noted as being the biggest rival in the AFC to the Chiefs. And they're sitting here in the beginning of 2023 with an injured quarterback saying, we're not going to let this season get away from us because we're that good, we're that big time. And you cannot force an injury like that. You can't. And it's not gonna improve. It's not going to improve. You cannot play a quarterback, doesn't matter who it is, if they cannot move off the pocket. It becomes the easiest pass rush of all time. And these guys are elite pass rushers on every single team if the guy can't move. This is the NFL. This is the top players in the world. The guy can't move. It's just an absolute tee-off zone on the guy. So I think that they got to sit him. They have to sit him. If they don't, I don't know what they're doing. Well, I do know what they're doing. They're just saying he's getting paid an ass load of money, grind, and we're the Super Bowl team. We're not going to let ourselves not be the Super Bowl team this year. And sometimes patience is a virtue. Sometimes you got to know it's not going to happen this year. Just let it be. Just let it be. Because forcing the issue could make it a hell of a lot worse. If they keep playing this guy and he tears his Achilles, that is far worse than a calf strain. And it is unfortunate, but it is very real. Calf strains, when pressured and not rehabbed correctly, do lead to Achilles injuries. Don't want to see it, but they're playing with fire here. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. They are playing with fire. Let's talk about the Falcons game. Interesting team. I think the Falcons were favored at -2.5. I think there's a couple of questions about the quarterback situation. I think Desmond Ritter's obviously been terrible. So they moved on from Marcus Mariota to Desmond Ridder. I don't think either option was very good. Now they're kind of stuck in purgatory, and I don't think they know what they're doing. I think Arthur Blank is unfortunately a mediocre coach, just another stopgap coach. These teams just hire because they don't really know what they're looking at. Unfortunately, that's just the way the sport is. Rush hires. Oftentimes they hire coordinators from teams that have had deep runs, guys that are not necessarily really head coach quality. They're more so coordinator quality. And I think Arthur Smith, excuse me, a couple Arthurs here. Maybe that's why he hired him. He liked his first name. Who knows? But, it's just the wildness of it. But I think the fact that it's getting steamed towards the Texans does speak towards the Texans. I think the Texans are fucking good. Like, no bullshit. I think they're good. And I think what you saw from the gun, he had Houston against Pittsburgh. And I suggested I thought that was the right side, too, because I was talking about the cross dynamic between the Rams and Pittsburgh both being in road back-to-backs and the reversal. And it's very true. Rams lost, and then they won. Steelers won, and then they lost. It's very real in terms of the law of averages and very unsustainable environments for teams. But I think the Texans are for real. And I think DeMeco Ryans is a very good head coach. You guys remember him? He was an absolute dog at Alabama. That was clearly before Nick Saban, but regardless, it's still incredibly high-quality SEC football. And he was a hell of a backer in the league. He's a dog. No way around it. I think he's a good hire, and I think he's a good coach for this group. I think he really connects with a young quarterback. I think you talk about psychology to some of these groups where it doesn't really hit. But I think if you look at this, young quarterback, young coach, both in their first year, that's a connection. And we've been sitting here talking about disconnection for so long. This is a connection. I think it's a good connection. I think they got it right. And I think it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think you see teams like this where people want them to regress. If you really analyze the fluidity of this product, I think it's not regressing anytime soon. And I think, if you want to make a cross-referencing point with the Falcons, the game they played against the Packers, and I think the Packers are worse than Houston. The Falcons were down double digits going into the fourth quarter and came back and won by 1 point. If we can use that as a corollary, which I think is very reasonable, I think the Texans are better than Green Bay. This is only the Falcons' second out-of-division game of the year at home. I think this might be a Texans spot yet again. And I think, again, just this idea that we have to fade the Texans because they had a big win and the Falcons just lost. I don't know if that's super strong. And not only that, but I do think that fading teams that go to London is very good. But I also think that fading teams when they come home from London is also very good. It's not that simple of an integration process coming back home either. So I think there's some merit to the Texans here, actually. Yeah, I think they are. I really do think they are. I think if you look at the coach, LaFleur, I've never thought LaFleur was a great coach. I thought he was, just another one of these hires, just one of these, analytical young guys. I believe he was with McVay. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was with McVay at one point. And it's just kind of the way that NFL hiring goes. It's these groups of guys. You get a head coach, the coordinators, they make a run. All of a sudden, the coordinators get hired. And it doesn't necessarily mean he's a great coach. He had Aaron Rodgers for a few years. Aaron Rodgers could bail out the worst of coaches. Let's be honest. Mike McCarthy was not really setting the world on fire with scheme and decisions in Green Bay for 15 years with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers should have won at least one more title, if not two, if they had slightly better coaching, in my opinion. A lot of skeptical, really key point decisions in really big-time playoff games by McCarthy that held them back, too. So I think that Aaron Rodgers never had a great coach up there at all. And I think that LaFleur is a mediocre head coach. You go to the psychological aspect of it. I don't think he's a great leader of men. I think he's too subdued. I think he's too quiet. And that is a central point in these conversations every single time, because I just fundamentally don't think in a locker room of grown men, big time, huge NFL athletes, like alpha energy at the highest level, it's hard to be a really subdued type of guy like that and motivate that group. And you go to the polar opposite of it. Look at Dan Campbell and the Lions. That guy is he's the polar opposite of guys like Staley, LaFleur, a couple others. But he's an alpha dog. He's an energy. He's huge, and he brings it. And they connect with it. And the Lions are great, but a lot of it is psychology. If the Lions had a different coach, they would not be this good. They really connect with that coach. Trent, what's up, brother? What up, my man? Yeah, Emal, 100%. 100%. Yep, 100%. It always plays out that way. Not always, but it's very, very uncommon that a really good leader, McVay is one of them for sure. Belichick's another great example. There's others, clearly. Their disciples they're not head coaching material. I was talking about it with Guns on the show on Sunday, but you're an assistant for a reason most of the time, because you're a secondary guy. You're tactical, you're smart, you can coach a smaller group. You can't coach 53 guys. You're not great with the media. You don't function amazingly through highs and lows. It's easy to be a great coach in the highs. It's not easy to be a great coach in the lows. And going back to the comment we made about Brian Daboll, I think Daboll tonight exposed himself. And I hate to say that, because I definitely do not consider myself to be a hot take guy at all. But I think when you see a certain behavioral level on the sideline in that environment, I think he at least told us one thing, that there's a certain amount of immaturity about Daboll that it's not great. And I think that a lot of these coaches are like that, fortunately. Bob Candyman, what's up, brother? Appreciate you, man. So the moral of the story on that, I do think the Texans are probably the lean. Can't say I love the game, though. I think there's definitely some counters to it. And on that point regarding the Packers game, who were we talking? I was talking to Mr. Mafio, I believe, on that one. The thing with the Packers game too, which I think brings at least some sort of conversational angle to this game. That game did finish, I believe, at -1, and this game is sitting at -1, Atlanta. And Atlanta did win the game by 1 point, 25-24. And I think that's something you have to look at in NFL football and college football, but more so NFL, where when you look at specific environments, you always have to look at the difference between divisional and out of division and conference and in conference, because it really is very case specific how teams function in conference, out of conference, and in division. And when you find the Falcons, again, having played the Packers outside of the division at home at 1 point final line to a push, and now you're sitting on the same line, I just think that they're potentially telling you the same story there. So the steam is all over the Texans, but I think you're tight here. For sure. A lot of games, a couple bye weeks. Whatever other games you guys want to talk about, I'm open for it. Just type them in the chat. I'll discuss. Just having a sip of water, guys. Good old-fashioned water. Always good. Always good. Talk about the Chiefs. Talk about the Bengals. I want to save the Cowboys for the discussion. If anybody has any other games they want to talk about. Let's talk about the Lions game, because we're on the Lions at -8.5. Okay, let me talk about the Lions briefly, and then I'll talk about the Jags. I'm gonna keep it pretty clean on the Lions here. Gator in the house, what up, brother? I think the broadcast just kind of froze up a little bit. Let me just take a sip, guys. All right, so the Lions, we've talked about this over and over and over. The Lions are the perfect example of the long-term law of averages, where a team was so bad for so long. And these are the best spots in pro sports and college, actually. But they really are the best spots. Is when you find a team that was literally so bad for such a long period of time, and then they find the right head coach, the right quarterback, and the right personnel group, they're going to run the table basically. And it's because they're just supposed to get to a higher mean, and to get to a higher mean, they have to win a ton of games, and they're going to because they are that good in the process. And we've talked about this week after week. This team is absolutely elite at home. Elite at home. I believe they've covered every single home game since the middle of last season. I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. Carolina has been awful on the road versus worse opponents. They lost by 14 points at the Falcons. They lost by 15 at Seattle. I know Seattle beat Detroit. I think that's more matchup specific. For whatever reason, Seattle just plays Detroit tough. I think Detroit versus the rest of the league is actually a better team. You guys saw what Seattle did tonight offensively, like basically nothing. Detroit is just on the beginning of an arc. And I always go back to basketball because basketball is just a better sample size. Of course, you get 82 games versus 17 now. But a great example of what I'm talking about is the Golden State Warriors were really terrible for a long period of time. And then when they started to hit their uptick in their average, that one season, they must have covered like 70% of their games. And that's ridiculous in the NBA. And the point is, the best teams to bet, and you have to find them, and when you find them, you have to ride them, are teams that were terrible for so long, and they're just going to cluster. And they're going to cluster. And it's statistics, and it's also the deep psychology of the group. There's no way you want to get in front of Detroit right now. Detroit is just hammer. And you look at the line. I mean, look at the line. You know, this is one of the beautiful things about line functionality in sports. You just have to look at what the line is telling you. In what contemporary recent history point are the Detroit Lions laying almost 10 points to another team in professional football? I mean, this is like a Chiefs line at home. And what books are telling you here is they are that good. And they're telling you margin is coming without question. And we'll go into some more details on Sunday, but that's just the bottom line there. Do Bears have a shot against the Deadskins? I mean, it's a great question. I mean, this game, like, there's a couple games this week that I swear, like, you don't want to play. I mean, this is one of them. The Jets versus the Broncos is probably the other one. The Saints and the Patriots is the other one. Saints-Patriots might be the hardest game of the week, in my opinion. I want to talk about that one, too. I'll talk about that one in a second. Let me talk about Thursday night. You know, the Bears, I don't know. I think the problem with the Bears more than anything is the coach. I think this guy Eberflus is very, very, very pedestrian. I think he's very disconnected. You know, we just talked about DeMeco Ryans being a great young coach for CJ Stroud. I think Eberflus is basically the polar opposite for Justin Fields. Older guy, white guy. You know, I don't mean to bring race into it, but there's a cultural aspect to it. Race does play a part from a cultural aspect. And not only that, the age gap is horrible. And I think that Eberflus is basically the polar opposite to DeMeco Ryans, and I think you're seeing it. I think the group is highly disconnected. I think the way he mismanaged, what's his name, the receiver, Claypool, he's a hell of a player, and they just mismanaged him. You know, you guys saw the quote that he had in the locker room, and he said, "I'm being misused," and actually the media kind of forced him into it. But the point is, you never let the guy get that far. You know, this guy is being so misused, and he's also not only misused, he's miscommunicated with. This coach has no conversation with this player. And the best coaches have conversation with all of their players as a group and all of their players as individuals. And this coach has none of that. And I think this group is lost. Lost. I will say this though, and my guy says the public this and that, yeah, but I want to take the Bears. That's what I was going to go for. Your comment there. Excuse me, guys. I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I think when you look at Washington here, I just paused because I was like, "Fuck, this guy's talking me into the Bears." You're talking me into the Bears because I already got the vision in my head. All right, so let's go into it. Fuck, here we go. All right, so Washington's off of this is a trap game for Washington. They just played their balls off on the road in the division against Philadelphia. They left it all on the table. Just a brutal, tough, hard-fought loss. Come home short week, worst team in the league. And I think important stuff. The only other time this year they played a real bottom feeder at home, they played Arizona on the same line, -7. They did not cover the spread in week 1. I think the Bears probably lose a tight game here. Honestly, I think this is a horrible spot for the Commanders. And again, I think it's crucial as a corollary point. The Commanders did not cover -7 against an out-of-division opponent from the NFC that's projected to be bottom 4 in the sport. It was 20-16 final on a -7. I think you're probably right on that. I think you're probably right. Probably right. And obviously taking it, to a higher point, just reiterating. Commanders on a short week off an overtime loss in the division where they left their heart out there on the field. Brutal spot. Brutal. Junior in the house. What's up, bro? Let's go. Bro, I cannot wait. I haven't announced what we're doing yet, but I'm so hyped, bro. I'm so hyped. It's going to be amazing. He did fuck up 100%. 100%. And again, it's just psychology. And Junior, it's twofold psychology. It's the overthinking, I think, of a guy like Ron Rivera, who clearly, before analytics was known as this riverboat gambler, thus his nickname. And now, how does the riverboat gambler not go for it? It's like he goes off brand because it was so contrarian to go for it before, and now going for it is the norm. So he regresses back to the other side. And it's like, bro, you're overthinking it. Stay the course with your action. And not only that, but just psychologically, his group was so gassed. And he said his group was so gassed, so he didn't put him back on the field. And the whole point, bro, how are you going to put back on the field for overtime if they're so gassed? Just stuff it up the middle with your running back or something. It's absurd. Yeah, Imal, I saw that. And that's the insanity of the whole thing, though. It's like your team's gassed. You can't muster up the energy to move the ball. What is it, 1.5 yards, 2 yards? But you are willing to go to 10 more minutes on both sides of the ball? Like that doesn't even make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. It's classic overthinking. Yeah, rolling up. My guy, 100%. This Bears spot, it really is the spot. It really is. I mean, this is one of those spots where it's like, this is like betting in a nutshell, where there's certain spots you just know are the right side, but it's going to be like hell in the game. And that's kind of like when I bet bad teams sometimes. I have to get like mentally equipped for the game. Whereas like when I bet a side that I really know is just like a great side, team is well coached, the line is amazing, we have matchup data, we have environmental analysis, like the Lions, I'm like, good. I'm making a cup of coffee, put the game on. They're going to score 21 in the first half. Let's ball. When you bet the Bears, you're like, I don't want coffee because I'm going to have a half heart attack if I have caffeine. I need to take a walk at halftime. I don't want to talk to anybody. They're going to give 2 horrible turnovers. The game's going to be some horrible backdoor in some fashion either way. and it's going to be stressful as hell for 3 hours and 15 minutes. And that's like the experience when you bet bad teams, because even if they cover, it's usually really stressful. And if you think about the game that the Cardinals played at the Commanders in week 1, it was pretty damn stressful either side. The Commanders were down significantly, but they were dominating the game. They actually kind of did what the Giants did tonight against the Seahawks. Commanders had 2 first-half turnovers, like gifted them, I believe, at least 10 to 14 points very quickly that they wouldn't have scored otherwise. And then they backdoored late. So that's the point. Like, Chicago could get a lead, but then they're going to get backdoored. Like, if you had Chicago last week at home, I think the closing line was -3, Denver, and it pushed. But how did it push? And this is my point. It pushed in the most chaotic, insane way possible. They're up 28-7, and they lose 31-28. And Justin Fields yet again gives up the ball for a defensive touchdown against. And it's like this dude, he was sitting in his locker room apparently for 30 minutes after the game, dejected, whatever, all the different emotions. But it's like, bro, I get it. You're a huge competitor. I mean, I respect Justin Fields, but it's like at some point you have to protect the ball. Like, you have to make an actual strategic on-field adjustment. It's not about your commitment or your desire to win. You actually have to change what you're doing on the field. And he's just been so loose with the ball week after week after week for seasons now, too. It's not just a small window thing. And I think it comes down to the fact that he doesn't have the right coach. He's never had the right coach. He's also had, I believe, multiple coaches. Don't check me on that. I'm not sure if Nagy was there his rookie year, but he's never had a good coach, and he's had too much mobility in the coaching staff. But also, I think he's never had a coach that taught him how to be a pro quarterback. The guy is incredibly athletic. He's an absolute lightning bolt in the open field. But I don't think anybody's ever taught him how to be a pro quarterback. And I think now he's in the worst possible position mentally, which is being caught between an incredible natural runner and a scheme that wants you to pass more. And I think this is just a really crucial point mentally. And Junior, you would probably connect with this idea. In sports betting and poker, both of them, some of the biggest failures people have is when they go from being public to sharp, they get caught in the middle and they overthink everything and they're totally confused. You can be a total fish and win to a certain degree and you're free. And when you get to a sharp mindset, you're totally free. When you're in the middle, you lose. I've seen some of my friends lose tons of money in sports and poker because they were terrible and they started to get coached to be better, but they weren't better yet, and they were stuck in the middle. And that's what Justin Fields reminds me of. He's a running quarterback that was not even remotely cultured strategically or mentally in terms of the NFL game from a passing scheme standpoint. They're trying to teach him it, so he's going away from running too much, and he's not yet skilled enough as a pocket passer. And he's just caught in the middle. And that's where you can just tell he's overthinking everything. The game's just not coming to him fluidly whatsoever. And I don't know if this coach is ever going to get there for him. Roll one up, my guy. I agree with you. I think he's far better of a natural talent. I think Ritter is just a stopgap. I think that was just basically when you get a team like Atlanta last year. You guys remember last year, Atlanta started the season, I believe, 5-0 ATS. They were running a really clean sheet, and I think they actually kind of pulled the trigger a little early on Marcus Mariota, but I mean, obviously it was symptomatic to the fact that, they were not going to the playoffs. So they said, all right, let's just see what we have in this Ritter guy. But he wasn't better than Mariota. No way. But again, Mariota was kind of a pedestrian guy anyway. Same thing we've been talking about this whole broadcast, just not a leader of men, quiet guy, doesn't really fire up the locker room, sort of pedestrian in his skill set. But this guy is not the guy, for sure. There's no way. And I think to a certain degree, what you're coming into the fact that a lot of these teams are really going to be tanking down the stretch for Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams, I hate to say he's the best prospect in whatever time frame, but I mean, this guy's an elite prospect. And I think the NFL draft has really an intrigue behind it this year because of this player. And it's very, very similar to the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. But of course, that was I would say slightly less interesting because if you guys remember that season, it was primarily just the Jets and the Jags were both terrible. There wasn't a lot of other teams hovering around that top pick. You know, if you look at the league right now, if we're talking number one pick for next year, I mean, there's definitely more than two teams in the conversation. Bears are obviously the front runner. Cardinals were supposed to be a front runner. All of a sudden, they're like sort of decent, and I think that's the coach. Jonathan Gannon is he's just a dog. Like he's like an army type of guy. Like he's just not going to let them lose games, and if they lose, they're going to compete. You know, they obviously didn't cover the spread for the first time at the Niners, but the Niners are the class of the conference. But 29, what up, brother? Yeah, Amal, you're right. But I think that on that, I think that, you know, when they tell you you're done and you're, you know, your early 30s or whatever, I don't know. It's hard to say, especially because he probably knew at that point he was never playing for the team ever again. You know, if you think about that, he knew he was moving on, so it was kind of like a full scale divorce, if you will. And I mean, I agree with you. Like, you want to be more professional, but I understand it. You know, you're at a breaking point in your career. You're in your 30s. You know, you're having a kid. You're an emotional guy. You know, you care a lot. Whatever. You're not even from the continental United States, from Hawaii. You know, they showcase his life out there and the whole thing. And I get it. I mean, like, you know, I'm a homebody type of guy myself. Like, if I was far away, always, I would have an emotional capacity within me for sure. And then you get cut, divorced. You committed a lot of energy to that team. I could see the reaction. I don't think it's as disrespectful as people might think when you really connect with the mental makeup of the guy and the whole thing. But yeah, Trent, 100%. Gannon is a top quality coach. And I think Steichen is also a top quality coach. I was saying this in my group chat to one of my guys, Nikki, who's a Philadelphia fan. And I was saying, you know, I can't remember the last time that a team lost both coordinators in one offseason of that quality. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. I think it might be one of if not the highest level of disruption in the last 20 years in the NFL from a coordinator standpoint. Both coordinators in one offseason, both very, very good. And I think you look at what's going on with both these teams. Arizona is way better than expectations, and the Colts are way better than expectations. And we are backing them on Sunday. If you guys didn't get that line, we're backing them on Sunday as well for most of that point. This guy Steichen clearly is right in the locker room with this group. You know, this guy Anthony Richardson, if you guys watched UF last year, hell of an athlete, but I think more importantly, far better from a mental makeup standpoint than I was aware of. A lot of great comments in training camp, and also just a better pocket passer. Super strong arm right there. And we're in there with that. But gonna wrap it up, guys. My voice is starting to burn out here. Been talking for an hour and a half straight. Love to do it. Appreciate you guys so much. Junior, I will talk to you probably tomorrow, and we'll start coordinating. We'll announce what's going on here shortly, but people who are listening probably know. Exciting opportunity. I think the best time is away. We're gonna have a fire show coming for you guys. Can't wait to do it. And all you guys in the chat, LBCC, Amal, Rolling Up Sun, Trent, Nets Bets was in the chat. My guy, Detroit Gators, all the time. All the best vibes. Appreciate you guys so much. Almost 90 minutes in the books here, Sharky Waters Nation on YouTube. Appreciate you guys subscribing. Tell your friends, tell people to subscribe. We're going to be doing content on here. As I mentioned, much better chat feature and just more interactive from an audio and video perspective. So sending you guys the best vibes. Beautiful Tuesday morning at 2 a.m. Eastern. Let's dominate this card, and we'll be on here probably on Thursday with the first show of the week. As I mentioned, maybe the Bears. We'll figure it out. 4 top plays already dropped on Twitter, now known as X. Sharky Waters Nation, now words of lifestyle. Ride the wave, or out of the water. Let's go.